you, Secretary. You're still at work? I haven't seen you in weeks. We're an estate engineer. I was beginning to think that maybe one of the legislators stole you.
We're still here.
Okay, good. Good morning, leader. Good morning, legislative members. Sorry that I'm late. I know that your time is valuable. Good morning. This is one of those great mornings where we get to invite all of you and the press to talk about good work that gets done by the legislature. And as many of you remember, thanks to both the state engineer and her team and Rebecca Roos, our infrastructure policy lead, which really translates now mostly to our water lead. We launched the 50-year water plan, and you heard me lament, which I don't mind lamenting some more, that it should have taken 5 years. But the issue is that when you talk about water to anyone, it's typically not a dialogue, it's a debate. Because water is life. The legal structure, federal, state, sovereign nation, constitutional, and state-by-state legal agreements and requirements are mind-numbing for most states, and anyone tied to the Colorado River, they're mind-numbing. So while I lament about that, we did a lion's share, we probably did 3 decades worth of work getting folks in the same room to talk about what a plan with action items might look like for the state. And while most states do water planning, required to and have to, particularly in the West, what that document does, it's a living document that helps us coordinate with the legislature, know exactly where we're on the same page, know where we're not on behalf of a constituent group or another, and build investments in infrastructure around that so that it's continually improving. And that is something, frankly, that I don't think enough states are doing, if any at all. And I would point out many of my western states governors that find themselves locked in because they're not putting the money aside. So in that regard, I want to thank the Senate and particularly the House and Representative Hadeda's leadership on strategic water supply. It was a mountain of work, and we launched it last year, and it got some really good play in the Senate, but I just didn't have enough time, and they didn't have enough time to really connect the dots with our constituents and advocates. So we did that. I'm sure someone's going to ask me about produce water, and we'll talk about that later, but that's House Bill 137, and we've got our key sponsors here, and I'm going to go to you in a minute. We also have what we call our Primacy Act. Leader Worth was the lead on that particular piece of legislation. We'll be in the majority of states, the 48th state, I think, to be able to administer permitting for water discharge, which is the role of the federal government. We want that, as much control over safe, clean water and water management. That is an area that states really do need the ability to move quickly and directly and not have to wait for the federal government. So I want to thank you. That's been an area with Leader Worth's leadership for a long time. He's not new to water policy, and it's actually created a lot of the funding structures. And the other 2 bills is why the Secretary's here, and everybody else, senators and House members, who worked at really dealing with a forever chemical that is now in our soil, in our cattle, and in our water supply. And that is PFAS. And our 2 Senate bills are they both Senate bills? Yes. House bills, both House bills. 20, I'll get them in a minute. Give me a minute. Still early, it's only 10 cups of coffee in. I'm not my best until I'm at 15 or 18. Both those bills deal with adding it, the definition to the Hazardous Waste Act, which is critical, but it's not in there. It minimizes our ability to protect people and to make sure that you're liable if you continue to use foam and other fire retardants. And the other is including in foams and fire retardants is starting to ban it from the very things we consume every day. Because PFAS is in everything. Are you ready? PFAS is in firefighters' uniforms. Not in New Mexico anymore, but it is still in plenty of those uniforms all across the country. So when firefighters come here from other states, they're literally wearing a toxin. and we don't want it here anymore. So a suite of bills that are incredible, and I'm very excited to be here to sign them. So without further ado, I'm actually going to start out of order, and I'm going to start with Representative Hedada on the strategic water supply.
Oh, no. Thank you.
Surprise! That's what they do to me. They say there's a press conference, there's a lot of people waiting for you, here's 4 bills. You may want to refresh your memory. They just did that. So now I'm doing it to you.
Okay. Well, House Bill 137 was a huge lift, really, for me. I'm going to tell you. We worked hard on this bill, and I really want to thank really the women of the Agriculture, ASECIA, and Water Resources Committee, because we really put the bill together there. I rolled it 2 times to get that bill.
I've almost forgiven you for that.
Almost. And we came back and we went to the final vote, and it was we squeaked through 5-4. And what this bill did is, well, I'll tell you that later. We squeaked through 5-4, and I really think it was rather a sympathy vote. But I'll take a vote any way I can get it.
Me too.
And we got it through that committee, and then we went to energy, and it was going to be a tough haul. We stripped out produced water, and what we have now is a bill which has $40 million for local communities for brackish water projects. We have $19 million in this bill for aquifer mapping and monitoring, which is really important, and to understand what a lift that was before they were getting $600,000 a year for that. So this is a huge new day for New Mexico. And then we have $4 million for more research to be done at NMSU with brackish water and how we reuse water in this state. So that pretty much sums it up. We got it through the House with no debate on the floor. I was kind of astonished. And headed over to the Senate, where we almost lost in conservation again, but we again squeaked through 5-4 on a bipartisan vote, and then got it to the House floor on the last day of the Senate, I remember, and I was just hoping that we would be able to get all this work accomplished this year. So this has been an amazing year for water legislation. I agree with the governor. It was a heavy lift on everybody's part, and I certainly want to compliment her staff, and certainly Rebecca Roos and all of the secretaries that were right at our sides every step of the way. So thank you, Governor, for that.
Well, and I really appreciate your leadership. We need to be dealing with brackish water for a number of reasons, but not the least of which states who continue to wait, who don't deal with their water shortages and what can be a future water supply in any number of ways, miss out on building the economy, and states that are planning on using water for energy are going to have, frankly, a hell of a time putting that together for AI and related data center and even, super quantum computing work, all the things in the future. And I'm sure, well, some of us, me mostly, remember being in the room about Intel. And we don't debate the water as much because, I think more than 93.5% is recycled, but it took a long time to get there. And the amount of water that we took out of our fresh drinking water aquifer to support that industry, because we didn't think about how, maybe we didn't have the technology we have today. That may be a fair issue. But this is a monumental stake in identifying water, in keeping our fresh water fresh and clean, and making sure that we can do both economic development and create assurances for a number of industries, including ag in the future. None of those decisions about how you use the water, just accessing, mapping, knowing, and starting to do treatment in brackish water supplies is contemplated so far in this bill. So next I want to go to our ability to do permitting. This has also been, I think, a fairly heavy lift. We have the 2 leaders in terms of the bill in the Senate and the House. I'm going to go to Leader Worth to talk about Senate Bill 21.
Thank you, Governor. Senate Bill 21 is another one of those big lifts, and it's a big deal. It gives New Mexicans control over the quality of our surface water and creates a new program to clean up legacy contamination here in our state. Could not have come at a better time.
Yeah.
Before this bill, as the governor mentioned, we were one of only 3 states. We were the only western state that allowed the federal government to implement the Federal Clean Water Act. It's called primacy. This basically meant that decisions about discharges into New Mexico's rivers were being made by EPA administrators in Dallas, Texas. Then, in 2023, the United States Supreme Court, in the Sackett versus EPA decision, a 5-4 decision, took away federal protections for intermittent streams and wetlands, which resulted in 90 to 95% of New Mexico's waters being unprotected. This bill fills those regulatory holes. And I want to thank Representative Ortez, who helped shepherd it through. It's interesting hearing Representative Herrera talk about the journey. I think we had some 5-4 votes in committees on this bill. We had 3 different referrals in the Senate. They teased me as the leader who refers bills. I triple referred my own bill, the governor's bill, the secretary's bill.
Really have forgiven you.
We needed to do that, though. It was that complicated, but we managed to get it across the line. Also, all the advocates who worked on this, I see Tanis Fox sitting there, but they're in the room. Thank you to all of them. And then, Mr. Secretary and Governor, you need to know that there were 3 primary Department of Environment employees who worked on this bill. Shelley Lemon, Jonas Armstrong, and Zach Ogaz. They did a phenomenal job and went above and beyond. Again, this was a very narrow window that we slid through to get this passed. So I just want to publicly thank all of them for the work that they did, and very excited to get this across the line.
You know, I learned something about them. I had them up here to celebrate its passage, and they can't keep a secret. One of those people.
One of those people?
Not one.
Oh, not one of those
No,
people.
not one, unless it was all you. But I don't think it was. I think it was that guy right there. So, just saying. All right, I'm teasing. Representative Christina Ortez, I'd love for you to also share a few words. It's a monumental success.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you to the New Mexico Environment Department. I felt very prepared talking about what this bill is going to do, from Jonas and Zach and Shelley, and Shelley in particular, who has been standing up this program already for the last 3 years, getting us to a place where we can introduce this legislation and have primacy over our own surface waters. This morning I was driving down along the Rio Grande from Taos, and while I was dealing with my own PTSD about coming back to the roundhouse too soon, but grateful to be here, Governor, for sure. I was thinking about all those tributaries that feed into the Rio Grande. The Rio Grande, a protected waterway, didn't lose its protections with the SACA decision, but all the other rivers and streams that are intermittent, ephemeral, arroyos that bring stormwater down into the Rio Grande, those streams lost their protections in 2023. And this is what that bill did. We brought those protections back and restored those important waterways to make sure that that clean water could flow back into the Rio Grande, so that communities could have water for irrigation, so that habitat could be protected. That's what this bill means to me and to my community, and every single district in our state can now rely on those protections that they'd had for 50 years prior. So I'm so grateful for Senator Worth for all the work that he did in referring it to those 3 committees. It was really important because in each of those committees it changed and it got better, and we were able to massage that bill to the bill that you see today. And so thank you for that. Thank you, Governor, for about to sign this legislation, and thank you to the department. Incredible work.
You're welcome. Thank you for your leadership. And the last 2 bills are bills that deal, as I said, with PFAS. And maybe to start it, since you were on both those bills, even though they're started in the House, I'm going to go to Senator Steinborn, if that's okay with my House leaders on this issue.
Thank you, Governor, and thank you for signing these. And I really want to pay homage to our Environment Secretary, who for years has, and for you, Governor, for
He's been the enemy of most of the legislators?
No, that's
Is that a
not going
different
to touch
guy?
that.
I don't think it is.
But for being a friend of the environment, and recognizing that New Mexico is dealing with some very profound contamination issues for a long time, and it's so important that we become aggressive on contamination and we try to stop it before it happens in the first place. And we have had, in Secretary Kenny and you, Governor, some real superhero-like efforts to fight very powerful entities, federal agencies who have brought this contamination, and you have had his back, and he continues to stay in the foxhole doing this work. These bills are a result of that, banning PFAS chemicals so we protect New Mexico's, regulating it so we can have parity with the federal agencies, to keep it from polluting our military bases. So thank you, Secretary, for you and your team's work, and you, Governor, for supporting it. That's what these two bills do. They're going to make New Mexico safer. They're going to protect our environment and our wildlife, and they're very important, proactive, visionary bills, and I thank you for your leadership. Honored to be part of it.
Thank you very much. Representative Hoffman-Beal.
Thank you, Governor, and I echo the sentiments of my Senate colleague here. You have an incredible secretary who is just champion for the environment. And in terms of the way you engaged with the legislature and especially House leadership, and you were in the trenches with us, and it was such a complicated bill. Getting it to a point where everybody could understand it, why it was necessary, and just your tenacity and your passion really shone through, and it's because of that we're here today. So thank you, Secretary. Thank you, Governor, for being willing to sign the bill, and thanks to everybody for championing. It's I think one of the most important issues of our time. So thank you very much.
You are welcome, Representative Cates.
Thank you, Governor. I often say that crime, education, taxes, health, nothing means without water. Water first, and the 50-year water plan has really educated and brought that priority to our attention. And today is a wonderful event to show that we're listening. And I want to thank you and the Secretary for educating and mentoring and getting us, and your faith in allowing. I know that there were many changes and bringing in different voices, and that takes a matter of faith in the process, and I very much appreciate that. This is a real testament that here in New Mexico we understand the importance of water, so thank you.
You are very welcome. Do any of our secretaries and our state engineer advocates without which we don't get things upstairs for me to sign and make a difference for New Mexicans? Do you all have anything to add?
Yeah.
You do.
Yes, Governor, I'd like to give the legislature some more time to talk about the But
I'm going to give you that. That was a good one.
in all seriousness, the accolades for the Environment Department do deserve to go to the people who are sitting behind around the room. The staff of the Environment Department is an amazing group of people, and it is amazing when you tell your team, do as much as your job as you see fit to do. Do it all. If you can think bigger, go bigger. And they rise to that occasion every single time. But I wanted to highlight the 4 bills in total. I think are so much greater than the sum of the parts or the individual pieces. And this is a real turning point, I think, for taking back control of our water, of what consumer products are coming into our homes, of teaching people how to treat New Mexico and its environment. And together, these really catapult us forward. And Governor, you always say we're protecting people from cradle to career, and I think this is exactly what we're doing. We're starting with New Mexicans today, and we're giving them that opportunity for generations to come to feel safe about their water, feel confident about economic investment, feel good about the products that they're bringing into their home are actually safe for their family. So I think today is individually significant, each individual bill, and then when you look at them together, it's a big, bold package. So thank you, Governor.
You are very welcome, and I agree with the sentiments of the legislature. Thank you for your incredible work and leadership. State engineer.
Thank you.
Madam engineer. You can pick it up.
Madam engineer, I like that. So So I agree with everything that Secretary Kinney said. I think that what's happening today, all these water bills, there was so much progress made during this last legislative session towards water. And I just want to thank the governor and the legislature and all the stakeholders for all of the work that they did to help these things come through, working really closely with all of our legislators during the session. We made a lot of progress. And for the strategic water supply in particularly, that one is really going to open up this new water supply for our state and preserve and protect our freshwater resources, which is critical. So allowing us to continue to develop and have industries come in and use the brackish water resources protects our water resources for generations to come. So
Thank you. You're very welcome. Mayor, anything to add?
Sure. Thank you, Governor, for being a visionary for the state of New Mexico with House Bill 137 for the D7 change and for all the
Looking for big jobs
Yeah,
there.
Yes.
Okay.
And thanks again. We're looking forward to working with the state on different projects. And like everybody says in northern New Mexico, la agua es la vida. Water is life.
It's nice to see you. Thank you. Tanis?
You know, when the Supreme Court issues its decision in May of 2023, New Mexico was really at a crossroads. Because we were looking at up to 95% of our rivers and streams not having Clean Water Act protection. And we were looking at up to almost 90% of our wetlands not having Clean Water Act protection. And as Representative Ortiz expressed so clearly, the waters that were at risk, these these wetlands, in the highlands, tributaries that are flowing down to the Rio Grande and the streams from which we draw our drinking water, well, they feed those waters, and if the waters that feed the waters are sick, so will the Rio Grande and other mainstream waters. And so we were at a crossroads, and New Mexico, met the moment. And, thanks to the leadership of Governor Lujan Grisham, thanks to the leadership of Leader Worth and Ortiz and others in the legislature. And, I just got to echo, what Secretary Kinney said about the work of the Environment Department staff. It was just amazing. But it took tribal governments, it took organizations like mine, all of us to push to get this bill through, the idea of which has been tested. Waters have been tested, so to speak, twice before and were successful. So the SB 21 really establishes a framework for the future. We have the building blocks now to protect our waters for now and for future generations. And it really is, I think as Leader Worth said, a big deal.
That's why we have a big signing ceremony. It's a big deal. So, without further ado, why don't we sign the strategic water supply first? Move that, and please don't steal this. I'll tell you what's gonna go sky high is coffee with the tariffs. So does that mean that I have to pay a higher share? Yeah, great.
They're buying bulk.
Yeah, I'm after, we do buy in bulk. All right, so it is the 8th day of April. Show Lujan Grisham, the last signature. House Bill 137, the strategic water supply is hereby exactly in the right order. I only have 3 bills. Oh, the pink one, I see it. Thank God you're here. All right, so we're gonna do all the House bills first. Again, this was really not in the briefing in the other room. But I like to sort of let it roll out the way that it does every day at work. It can be a surprise. So we're gonna do the PFAS hazardous waste definition, which is House Bill 140. Approved this 8th day of April. Signed by the governor. Michelle Lujan Grisham is now here by law. House Bill 212, the PFAS hazardous waste definition so we can regulate this 8th day of April. We should invite the legislature they would love that, all the line item vetoes. It takes about 15 straight hours, it's fantastic. It's a lot of signing and
A
initiating.
whole bunch of fun.
Or you could say you should just not do it. Well, probably not
All right, so that's it.
gonna. All right, these are all signed, here we go. Managing our water the way that we should always have been able to do. Senate Bill 21, this 8th day of April. Signed, hereby law. As we get ready to take questions, we have a very special guest. I'm not sure where she is, but Michael Coleman's mother is here with us today. Susan, it's not his fault I wasn't ready to go. It was the chief of staff. Mike was ready.
Thank you, Gov. Appreciate that.
I wondered why you were all dressed up like this. Now I know. Can you come to every press conference? It's nice to meet you. It's really nice to meet you.
This press conference is, part of the reason crime is so important.
Aw, thank you. Dan, thank you for allowing us to have your son in public service. It's not for the faint of heart, and we're grateful. Thank you.
Well, he's not for the faint of heart.
We could be best friends. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, John. Now you got me crying. Thank you. She raised me really caring about all these things, and it really helps me as I help you.
And
So,
you do.
all right, let's go to our my former alma mater, Albuquerque Journal, Dan Boyd.
Nice seeing all of you. I guess kind of queuing up the tease that you mentioned, but the produced water part of the bill that was stripped out, as one of the legislators mentioned. Curious if that's still something you plan to pursue, and obviously there's been some resistance to that part of the legislation in the legislature.
Yeah, on both sides of that, what I would say is I'm going to oversimplify the issues. Look, I'm pleased that the legislature has supported us, and that the Environment Department's been really tough on recycling that water. Before this administration, oil and gas, which uses a vast amount of fresh water in fracking, was buying up all the water rights in an area that we're spending, by the time we're done on just the Ute water effort, because the Ogallala aquifer is basically empty. We will have spent more than $1 billion between federal and state money on that. So we can't be using fresh water. And that's just an easy example, and it's not where our priorities are for fresh water. So I appreciate that they're doing that. But they still go after some fresh water in areas where I don't have regulatory control, or the reuse issues become problematic. And we have a lot of water that's moving. And the regulations right at the border aren't nearly as sufficient as they are in New Mexico about produced water. So we're allowing, so we did PFAS, but we're letting poisoned water be right nearby. And I don't think we should. I think we should clean up every bit of contaminated water wherever it exists, from uranium mill tailings to produced water, all of it. I do see that, oil and gas, and there are costs to doing business, that we should charge them for cleaning up this water, and that money ought to come right to us. They don't love that idea, and I would say, particularly now with the economy, asking them to pay for that water, I might get more pushback than normal. But I plan to do that anyway, and sometimes it's just how I ask the question, how long it takes for that to settle, and clearly I have some work to do with the legislature and the advocates. And I understand people get very nervous about the notion that we might clean up water and then use it in ways that the public doesn't agree with. We are not gonna do that. We put in our legislation for the strategic water supply, and we'll do it again, that we cannot, it would take specific and direct legislative action to go from a shall not to a may. So this is just cleaning it. And then Texas can store it all they want. Maybe we build Texas for something. That would make me happy. But the point is, I just think that the cleaner it is, the more we can re-incentivize by regulation, not by investments. Reusing that water and the technology to pay so that the lifespan of that water in that industry in a recycled fashion is longer and longer and longer until it's just one continuous loop, no fresh water ever. And again, it ought to be routinely cleaned because we don't want any contaminated water in the state. So I do plan on doing that again. And I have a year to continue to make the case, and the secretary and the state engineer, and we'll make the case to our advocates and stakeholders and see if we can't get closer. I would like to say one last thing about that, and I don't know if anybody else has anything else to say, but I think we're seeing some movement. It wasn't enough in this session, but it was more of a hell no in the session before that. So I feel better that we're making progress, so it says that many of our statements, arguments, and strategies are salient and are beginning to really get to the folks who really need the assurances that they deserve as the decision makers on the policy end. Does anybody have anything else to add about that? Okay. So yes.
Let's go to Griffin Rush on KOE.
Sitting on the strategic water supply, so from our understanding, the state didn't really need to pass a bill for companies to start doing this on their own, and we know that companies have been already interested in it. Can you explain what this bill is going to do to help, get the ball rolling on this?
Well, a couple of things. It fast tracks, right, some of those investments so that you can equalize. It just doesn't happen in one area like Albuquerque, that it's broader than that. It also, as Representative Herrera said, it invests in more of an infrastructure for universities and the study and the mapping. So without mapping, we don't know where, we have a general idea. I should be very careful about that. We have some very brilliant people, in fact, in this room, who study water constantly. But without the kind of resources where we're mapping in real time both brackish water reserves and their movement, and our freshwater aquifers and their movement, we've got real trouble in being able to design and define which strategy goes first and with what innovation. And so this creates that infrastructure. And I might add that all these bills total plus other investments is just under $400 million. It's $380 million in water, in grants and loans to do more of this work, which will return not only that consumer protection side, but it'll boost our economic footprint in the state as well.
And then following up with that, are there any specific communities or part of the state where you expect these strategic water supply operations could really be taking off?
I'm going to go to legislators who might have heard that and to the secretary, but I can already tell you I am being hit up, and I haven't even mentioned it to you, by sovereign nations in the Northwest, by Otero County folks, because they've got a really slow desal plant. What I mean by that, just because we aren't mapping, we aren't doing the investments, we aren't creating a loan opportunity if it wants to be run by the local officials, et cetera, the relationships between New Mexico State, it just hasn't moved as quickly as it otherwise might have. And certainly, and I don't know what, again, this is water we identify and we clean. It's a reserve. But if there was ever a place to start doing the next decade of conversations in ag, about how you use less fresh water, you map it carefully. I can't think of a more appropriate county, given our ag footprint where there is no water left, than Doña Ana County. And again, let me just restate that very clearly. It says that we do not use this water for ag. But mapping it and knowing you can't make the next set of decisions when somebody asks you to. It won't be me, but somebody will. They'll have to.
We'll take it, Gov.
You got it.
Thank you.
Unless you're mapped up, right? So those are at least a couple, but make no mistake that Sandoval County, Bernalillo County, going west is an area of large brackish water supply that I have no doubt folks are already coming to the two of you asking for assistance, with a lot of private and public ownership interests in both those. Is that a fair description? Okay. Anything you guys want to add? All right. We have brackish water everywhere, so for the state who's watching, those are the big areas that have been working on it, but we have brackish water everywhere.
Let's go to Faith from KOT.
Hello, hi, I have two really quick questions, but I just want to make sure I got this down correct. You signed into law House Bill 212, Senate Bill 21, House Bill 137, then what was the four? I didn't.
House Bill
140.
140, okay, thank you.
Secretary.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So, I mean, you stated in 50 years, water experts predict the state would have had 25% less water to use. Had you not signed these bills into law today, what would that reality have looked like for our state and New Mexicans? I know you touched on it briefly, but if you can just elaborate so people can understand the greatness of this bill.
Yes, these funds follow the policy. You don't have a policy, you don't get the investments from the legislature. It sounds like I'm complaining, but that's their job, is to connect those two dots. And without it, they often can't or don't. And so it's monumental. And best case scenario for me is that we have 25% less. And even if we're wrong, and all of a sudden climate change brings us atmospheric rivers, you still would have drainage, water contamination, we'd have a number of issues, and flooding. This is both about protecting New Mexicans, protecting us from emergencies, and being smart about planning for the future. So I really appreciate the question. New Mexicans need to know that the legislature and the executive branch, the state, we are working every day to make sure that we soften whatever blows are coming, and they are. These droughts are real in the next 50 years, but we're also being smart about making sure that the basics are protected in any number of ways in which we use water, including acequias and 400,000-year-old agricultural practices. This is all so that we can maintain as much of that as possible.
Thank you, Governor. Then I have a quick question because this is just a concern, but I feel like I know the situation. There's obviously a concern for some people on the deadline of signing or vetoing bills into law before the deadline approaches. Obviously, it's a part of the process as you review each bill carefully before the deadline, but with 3 days left, can you just speak to that? Because as of today, I mean, we did get the email that you signed 60 bills into law so far. I think
I'm almost halfway there.
I know. We have a little over 100 to go, but you know, I understand how the process goes, but you know, for people that may not understand how that looks like, do you want to speak to
I
that?
do. There is something actually I should have known. I'll bet you most governors don't actually know it. That it takes quite a while before the bills come to me. So we use a very tried and true system that get a lot of reviews. I know that this may seem harsh or odd, but we make mistakes. And so language that got stripped out doesn't actually get stripped out. And everybody needs to know that. And so we have an enrolling and engrossing. So they know that what they passed, every debate, every amendment, every issue, is embedded in these bills in exactly the way they're intended before they get to me. So I don't get them for weeks, often. And I think we've got them all now, but that surprises me. I think that at 1 o'clock, they bring me 194 bills, and I can start reviewing them right then. Now, we have a good sense of the concepts, certainly. A lot of these bills are ours. You'd be surprised at the number of things, and again, it's not a complaint, it's just reality, where we look at a bill and go, oh no. It amends the wrong body of law. That has happened, and it doesn't get caught. I can't sign that bill. And so we go through it line by line, word by word. There's a whole, how many team is that? There's like 15 people who are reading bills, then it goes to the legal team, they do another legal review, then I sit down after those two processes have taken place, and I take custody of a bill. All right, and I look at it, we reread it one more time, we talk about what it does, what it doesn't do, and I have one of three choices for New Mexicans. I can veto it, so I have a veto message, I tell you why I vetoed it, and I don't sign that bill. I can do something called the pocket veto, and some of the legislators don't want me to do that anymore. But when you get 1,000 bills up here, writing 1,000 messages is a lot more complicated than it may seem on face value. I have 3 lawyers up here, and I get about 100 IPRAs. It takes all 3 of them all day long, every day, 7 days a week, just to deal with the IPRAs. That's before we deal with all the lawsuits, thank you very much. So they have a lot of work to do, and they also provide oversight to all the other cabinets and their general counsels. It's a huge job, right? So that pocket vetoes are important, and sometimes it's not unequivocal. I mean, it's not black and white. It's a really hard decision to make, and I can't quite articulate. I don't think we're ready to sign that. All right, so that's a pocket veto. And then the rest you sign, and then I write messages sometimes so that people know why I signed it. I think people need to know why we signed a bill that may seem on its face that it's not quite right, or seem perfect, but I want them to know I signed it with a little bit of trepidation, and this is why. And I might set the stage that in the next session, I want us to amend it. So I'll write a message. So it's actually a lot more work than it might seem. It's good work. It's the work that we are called to do, but that's why it usually gets in every session. It gets into those last 3 or 4 days, and maybe last to the public. And don't feel sorry for us. This is the work that we love to do. These are 20-hour days. I think typically the last 6 years, the night before the last, it's a 24-hour session. I go home and brush my teeth and come back and finish the signatures and the line items. So it's a lot of work. So it gives me a chance to thank everyone in state government for pulling more than their fair share.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, we'll go to Daniel Kupon.
Hi, Governor. One of the drivers of the water shortage in New Mexico is climate change. You have a 30-day session, a special session notwithstanding, but you have a 30-day session coming up. Are you going to put climate change on the call?
Well, I've tried to, not tried on the call. We've had something about climate change in every legislative session since 2019. I mean, our landmark legislation, the Energy Transition Act, was 2019. I would like to have in my last legislative session, in state law, not just in rule, that we intend to have a 2050 deadline for emissions in all sectors. Most states, and we are too, we are on track in some ways and not on track in others to do better than 2050, certainly in utilities, so 2045, 2040, but it has slowed up a bit in the last year and a half, which is something I've explained to my 2 secretaries at Energy and Environment. They better find a way to make it go faster. But I would like that codified. My message to everyone is, particularly now, I think a lot of New Mexicans in particular, but a lot of Americans are feeling very pressured if you disagree with some of the decisions out of this new administration, because there are no decisions that embrace climate change as a real crisis to address. They're the opposite. So that states need to really embed that. But if we continue to try to draft legislation, and I can lecture you guys, can't be perfect, there's no such thing. If I could make that standard, we do it every time. There is no such thing. You do not have a bill that you do not amend. All right, so that would be a message. This is sort of tough, particularly for the House, because many of those committees said, here's a bill, you may not amend it. Well, that's not how it works. That's not even a good idea. You've basically said you don't need any of your constituents. You do. We amend bills. Sometimes they're friendly, sometimes they're not friendly. But we, in this particular space in climate change, we have a very large coalition of very smart, passionate people. But if they debate that it has to be perfect, the likelihood that we can't move it is very high. And it may be why Congress has never gotten it right. So my message is, let's get it right. It's the last chance, and people should expect me to have a little bit better than a scalpel approach, a little bit less than a sledgehammer about where we're going in climate change. But get it codified in state law is what I would like. I know that I'm preaching, but it's a precursor to the 30 days. So now you've just heard my State of the Union address. I hope you liked it, because this is shorter than the normal ones. Well, I'm basically, you don't even have to think about it. Less work for you.
Thanks.
Yeah, you
Last
can
question,
have
we're
it.
gonna go back to Dan.
The secretary wants to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, Danny, just to follow up, I think a real case study for progress, not perfection, was House Bill 140 and House Bill 212, our two PFAS bills. We started out with a broad authority to come to the Environment Department related to PFAS in general in 140, and 212 was, I'll say it, more aggressive. And through negotiations with stakeholders, we got through the House floor and the Senate floor in a supermajority kind of way. I don't think anyone on the House, I think we had one House floor vote against 212. I'm trying not to relive these moments, actually. But nonetheless, we got through a really good vote count on the House and Senate on both bills. But I think what I'm seeing around the country, and I chair the Environmental Council of States, which is all the environment secretaries around the country, and we just had our meeting in DC, and the theme of that meeting was progress, not perfection. And hearing you say that, Governor, about climate is that if we don't choose progress and we continue, to the Governor's point, to choose perfection, we are not...
We'll lose ground.
We will lose ground. Well said. So I think 212 and 140 are a case study on how to move something through the legislature in a way that we know will come back to these bills. We know we will. But we have a great footing, a great foundation to start from.
Right, and then that's a big thank you to the legislature, because they take a lot.
Yeah.
They get all the incoming. And so it takes, it's a testament and courage to tell people that you hear them, you believe them, and you want to do right by them. And the best way to do right is by making it forward, one step towards that direction or 10. And it's hard. And they do it every day. And these are examples, and I think, I've got my fingers crossed, I think we can do it next year. That will be a real testament in that courage as well.
Dan, for the final question.
Again?
On an unrelated issue a little bit, but last time a lot of us were here, you mentioned the possibility of a special session on public safety bills, and I don't know if the legislators want to hear that right now, but wanted to know if there's been any kind of updates, or if you thought more about that and kind of where things stand.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still feeling like that's really necessary, particularly after the devastating tragedy in Las Cruces. I point to that the three individuals who lost their lives, teenagers, that 3 of the 4 arrested. I would argue that a 19-year-old, by every standard, is a teenager. That we don't have a system to deal with this. When we have this kind of violent crime with youthful offenders who are openly carrying assault weapons, we don't have a system to deal with this. And so I'm as concerned as I was then. A little bit of sleep, more coffee, feeling a little better, but here's where we are. And I hope you don't mind that. I have reached out to the leadership, the Democratic leadership in both the House and the Senate. I've talked about the things I'd like to see us do, and again, the case that I make is I've got folks that are in temporary custody that will be released without anything. And one of those murdered again when they were released. And based on what I know from the court records and everything else, the likelihood murders again, high. Mostly because he will tell you so. I have an obligation to the rest of New Mexico that cannot knowingly be done. So there are other issues. And we, I think, have a general sense, primarily by the leadership in the Senate, not yet, as everyone knows, and our condolences again to the Speaker for the loss of his father. With that, they need some time to be available, families first. But look, the courts and corrections and the justice interim committees are good vehicles. They provided a really effective pathway for the 60-day session on our omnibus public safety package. I think that we should be starting now, early. I know you're tired, but early. And I don't mean that in a condescending fashion. I don't think people know. Our legislative sessions are frenetic and intense, and so I meant it in a non-condescending. There's a physical and emotional, you're exhausted, and then everybody goes back to work, another job. I would start those right away, and the rationale for me more now is, again, I have folks in custody temporarily now with no place for them to be, and no legal authorities that start to create accountability. And even in the recent crime issues we've had this week, it's more teenagers with guns. It's between 3 and 4 days a week. I have a teenager with a near fatal shooting situation every week. I don't know how many victims is that a week? It's not just one person shot at. Well, I haven't said this to Representative Herrera, but there were 80 rounds fired at Pathways 2 weekends ago. 80 rounds by one teenage gang against another. 80 rounds. I don't know how somebody wasn't hurt or killed. The intention is to do that next time. We do not have a body of law that takes these issues into consideration, and we must. It's wrong. It's not fair to New Mexico. That's my opinion. But I have not gotten yes, that's where we'll head. I've gotten I think, warm sense that we should be talking more about it, not less. And we have to go to our caucuses. They don't make decisions without their caucuses. And then we have to sort of see where we are. Is that a fair description of our conversation?
I think it is a fair description. And again, we've certainly got a roadmap for how to do it and how not to do it. And so I think the Courts Corrections Committee and the leadership of the two judiciary chairs, Chandler and Cervantes, what we were able to do with the criminal competency bill, which was a very challenging, big lift. It was ready to roll in those first 30 days. And so, again, I think giving us the chance to work on those issues. We've not really addressed the juvenile code and the children's code for a long time here. And so that's something that does need to be worked through, and I appreciate certainly the governor's passion and desire to move this forward, and I think that is a good direction, but something that we'll certainly visit with our team in the Senate, and the House will talk about and kind of see where that goes.
But we are in active conversations.
Thank you. Thanks everybody for coming.
Thank you. Congratulations, I have a lawyer now. Yeah, I've hired a lawyer. I'm sorry. Takes me.